In one moment, one scene, Sharon Stone became unavoidable. Bright white lights, cigarette smoke hanging in the air, a room full of male detectives trying to dominate an interrogation, and Catherine Tremell sitting calmly in control. That single scene from Basic Instinct didn't just shock audiences, it reshaped pop culture. Sharon Stone wasn't simply introduced as a movie star. She became the symbol of a new kind of power in Hollywood. Intelligent, erotic, dangerous, and completely self-possessed. In the early 1990s, few actresses commanded more attention, conversation, or controversy than she did. And yet, today, many people casually ask the same question, what really happened to Sharon Stone? By the mid-1990s, Sharon Stone was at the absolute peak of Hollywood. Following Total Recall in 1990, she transitioned from supporting roles into full-blown stardom. Basic Instinct in 1992 was the breakthrough that changed everything. The film was a worldwide hit, turning her into a global phenomenon almost overnight. She dominated magazine covers, fashion editorials, talk shows, and red carpets. Directors sought her out not just for her looks, but for the intensity and intelligence she brought to the screen. She followed that success with films like The Specialist, Sliver, The Quick and the Dead, and then delivered the most critically respected performance of her career in Martin Scorsese's Casino. Her portrayal of Ginger McKenna earned her a Golden Globe and an Academy Award nomination, proving she was far more than a sex symbol. At that moment, Sharon Stone had power, prestige, and momentum. Hollywood was hers. Sharon Yvonne Stone was not born into fame or privilege. She was born in 1,958 inches, Meadville, Pennsylvania, a small industrial town far removed from glamour or celebrity culture. She grew up in a strict household and was known as a highly intelligent child, reportedly tested with an unusually high IQ. Her early life was academically focused, not centered on acting dreams. Modeling became her entry point into the industry after she won local beauty competitions and was encouraged to move to New York. She signed with Ford Modeling Agency and worked internationally, but modeling was never her end goal. Acting fascinated her more, and she transitioned slowly into film and television roles, taking years of minor parts and forgettable projects before real recognition came. Her early film career involved persistence rather than luck. Appearances in projects like Stardust, Memories, and Deadly Blessing gave her experience, but little visibility. Total Recall finally placed her in front of a worldwide audience, and Basic Instinct catapulted her into superstardom. However, the film also locked her into a persona she did not fully control. Despite later statements that she felt misled about how certain scenes would be shot and perceived, the damage and fame were irreversible. The public and media fixated on the sexual aspects of the performance, while often overlooking her intelligence and craft. Sharon Stone became one of the most recognized faces in entertainment, but also one of the most polarizing. In response, she took risks. Casino was a deliberate step toward legitimacy, and it worked critically. But Hollywood is rarely forgiving, especially to women attempting to redefine themselves. While some of her later 90 Seconds films performed well commercially, others underperformed, and the industry began shifting its attention toward younger actresses. The pressure of ageism, typecasting, and expectation began tightening around her career. Still, none of that explains why Sharon Stone seemed to vanish so abruptly from the position she once occupied. That explanation begins in 2001. At the age of 43, Sharon Stone suffered a catastrophic medical emergency. She experienced a subarachnoid brain hemorrhage caused by a ruptured vertebral artery, essentially a severe stroke that left her with a 9-day brain bleed and only a small chance of survival. According to her own accounts, her symptoms were initially dismissed by medical professionals, and she was sent home before the hemorrhage worsened. When the severity was finally recognized, she nearly died. The aftermath changed everything. Recovery was slow and brutal. She lost weight, strength, speech, clarity, memory function, and the ability to read and write with ease. She later revealed that she had to relearn basic cognitive skills from scratch. This wasn't a short recovery or a temporary setback. It was a full reset of her life. While she was fighting to regain basic functioning, Hollywood moved on without her. During this period, her personal life unraveled as well. She went through a divorce, custody disputes, and has spoken openly about losing much of her financial security, claiming millions were taken or mismanaged while she was incapacitated. At a moment when she needed stability, she instead faced isolation. To the public, it appeared as though Sharon Stone's career had simply faded. In reality, she had been forced into the most difficult fight of her life, one that had nothing to do with box office numbers or critical reviews. By the time she was physically and cognitively able to return to work, the industry she returned to was different. And so was she. The Sharon Stone, who once commanded instant greenlights, now approached projects cautiously, selectively, and often on her own terms. This wasn't a fall from grace, it was survival, and it marked the dividing line between the first and second half of her life. When Sharon Stone slowly re-entered the public eye after her stroke, the comeback was nothing like her rise. There were no blockbuster leads waiting and no media frenzy announcing her return. The industry had moved forward, and the woman who came back was no longer the invincible star of the 1,990 seconds. Instead, she was a survivor relearning how to live. She began taking smaller roles, often on television, allowing herself time to rebuild. Guest appearances on shows like The Practice and Law & Order, SVU showcased a quieter, more controlled presence, and her performance earned her an Emmy Award, reminding audiences and critics that her talent had never disappeared. It had simply been interrupted. Her film work in the years that followed reflected a deliberate shift. Rather than chasing the type of roles that once defined her fame, she gravitated toward ensemble casts, independent films, and character-driven performances. Movies like Broken Flowers, Alpha Dog, and Bobby showed a more restrained and introspective Sharon Stone, someone less interested in dominating the screen and more focused on substance. These projects rarely carried the commercial weight of her earlier hits, but they marked her return as an actress on her own terms. The spotlight was no longer the goal, survival and meaning were. Behind the scenes, her life was changing just as dramatically. Sharon Stone became outspoken about what she had experienced, especially the way her medical emergency was initially dismissed. She has repeatedly spoken about doctors not believing her symptoms, a reality many women face in healthcare. Her willingness to discuss disability, recovery, and vulnerability marked a sharp departure from the silent, polished image Hollywood once demanded. She became a visible advocate for stroke awareness and patient rights, using her platform not to revive her image, but to warn others and push for change. Spiritually and emotionally, she sought grounding. Sharon Stone has spoken openly about turning to Buddhism and meditation as tools for healing and perspective. After facing death, losing her physical abilities, and watching her career dissolve overnight, fame no longer held the same value. She redirected energy toward humanitarian work, charity efforts, and advocacy. Some of these efforts drew criticism, but they underscored a clear shift in identity. She was no longer chasing approval from the industry that had already moved on. In 2021, she released her memoir, The Beauty of Living Twice, a title that openly acknowledged the fracture in her life. The book detailed childhood trauma, sexual abuse, Hollywood exploitation, her public image being built without her consent, and the stroke that nearly killed her. Most importantly, it reframed her story. She did not describe herself as a star who fell, but as a woman who survived something most people never fully understood. The memoir made it clear that the second half of her life was not about reclaiming fame, but about reclaiming autonomy. As she reached her 60 seconds, Sharon Stone began receiving a different kind of recognition. Film festivals honored her with Lifetime Achievement Awards, fashion houses celebrated her enduring elegance, and interviews focused less on scandal and more on resilience. In recent years, she has spoken candidly about Hollywood's ageism, saying older actresses are not discarded because they lack talent, but because the industry struggles to see women beyond youth. Unlike earlier decades, she no longer softened her views to protect her career. That career no longer defined her. So what really happened to Sharon Stone? The simplest answer, that she faded from relevance, misses the truth entirely. She didn't disappear because audiences stopped caring or because her talent declined. She nearly died, She survived a catastrophic brain hemorrhage, lost her health, her financial security, and much of her professional momentum, then rebuilt her life from the ground up while the world assumed she was done. What looked like a quiet exit was actually a brutal interruption followed by a conscious reinvention. Her legacy now exists in layers. She will always be remembered for Basic Instinct and the cultural shockwave it created. She will be remembered for Casino, which proved she was capable of depth and devastation beyond shock value. But she is also remembered as a woman who publicly exposed how unforgiving fame can be, how quickly power vanishes, and how survival rarely looks cinematic. The strength she showed after losing everything may be her most important performance. Sharon Stone no longer fits neatly into Hollywood narratives. She is not a comeback story designed for applause, nor a fallen star frozen in nostalgia. She is something far less convenient and far more honest. A survivor who lived one life under the spotlight and another outside of it. The interrogation room that once symbolized her power has been replaced by a quieter presence, shaped not by control over others, but by control over herself. That is what really happened to Sharon Stone. What do you think about Sharon Stone's journey and legacy? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that look beyond the headlines.